speaking to how the records are dynamic and changing, a lot of souls come in and you can immediately, when you tap into their records, you can see the multidimensional aspects and whether they've had many more incarnations or existences on Earth or off planet or galactic. Some of these lifetimes were lived, some of them are part of the collective archetypal experience. A typical one would be the witch being burnt at the stake. So, did they actually get burnt at the stake, or are they so clearly tapped into that ancestral lineage? And what matters is that we're here right now as we are, with the privilege of understanding more of what lives inside of us that doesn't need to live inside of us so that we can clear our path. And when did you feel awe? Like that sense of awe to me is the greatest portal to healing and to our universal multidimensional self. So as our experience of life expands, so does the consciousness that we have access to.
So I would love to know your perspective on how you integrate Reiki and Akashic.
What is this magic of life? Like, as soon as you're out of the typical perspective, I felt so connected to the sky. And then, from above, feeling so much love and curiosity for the ground.
We all tell stories. Ultimately, our memory is actually the stories that we tell ourselves. And hi, this is Akanksshaa. If you're new here, please subscribe to my channel. If you resonate with me, please like, comment, and share. Welcome to Multidimensional Soul Podcast and a Talk Show. Our guest today is Tammy Stone from Canada. She is an Akashic Records Reader, a Reiki Master, and an author. It's so lovely to have you here, Tammy. Warm welcome to Multidimensional Soul Talk Show and Podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. We just did a little bit of a settling in space. And as soon as we entered this field, there's so much love permeating the space. And I'm so, so grateful to be here to connect with you in this sacred space and also to have a chance, this opportunity to connect with your lovely audience. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Sure, you're most welcome. It's my pleasure. And I would like to share with our viewers or our audience that you have kept the records open throughout this conversation. You are a conscious channel. So we have the records open.
Yes.
Amazing. So can you tell us a little bit about how did you get into Akashic Records reading and overall spirituality?
Yes, thank you. And it's such a beautiful question to be able to get to know, everyone that we meet, whether it's our clients or being on a podcast. And I was thinking how interesting it is because I truly believe that as I know that you do and we all do, that we are spirit having, a human experience and that we're here to be understanding ourselves through a human experience. So everybody is spiritual, and yet it's so interesting to hear from everybody how they're aware that they're spiritual, or there's so many that think, am I know that there's something more, and I know there's a path that we want to be on, and am I worthy of that path, or what is it? And there's so many layers of understanding around spirituality, and I deeply feel like we are our own kind of key to the mystery of everything. And so to kind of look back on the life and think, how did I get myself here? It's a really interesting thing to contemplate. And without saying too many things, I'd love to just give a couple of things. I was looking back and, what kind of brought me here even before I had any awareness of getting here, because at least in maybe our generation, we didn't grow up thinking I'm going to be an energy healer. Or, it was, I had a very, a conventional upbringing, no outstanding stories that would guide me exactly to where I am. And I think in that sense, a lot of people can relate to that. I do remember when I was, all basically a toddler, and my parents would bring me to visit, my grandparents, and I was the first child in a while in our family, and there was so much excitement around that. And I distinctly remember that my mother or my father would place me. My grandmother lived in an apartment building kind of high up, and they would place me on this shelf, not shelf, like this window ledge, and where I could look down on the city. And and my mother told me also, I was so curious, like even at, the age of 2 or so, like, what is that? What is that? And I remember that feeling of being above, from this higher perspective, just being fascinated by what was happening in the world and so curious. And at the same time, I have another early childhood memory of being in a car with my family, and we were driving somewhere, maybe on vacation. And I guess I was tired, and I was lying down in the back seat, looking up through the window, and looking up at the sky and the clouds and the sun, and having that same feeling of awe, like coming from the ground and looking up and thinking, what is this magic of life? Like, as soon as you're out of the typical perspective, I felt so connected to the sky. And then, from above, feeling so much love and curiosity for the ground. And then at the same time, that level of being here, in this third density reality felt a little bit more challenging. It felt a little bit more confusing. Even at a young age, it would be fairly typical, I guess, for light workers to say we didn't always feel like we belonged. Maybe you can relate as well. It just, everything felt a little bit off or not quite real. And so um, in that realm, what really lit me up was two things: exploring and reading. And I became just an avid reader. And reading is such a portal to other dimensions and to other realities. And I just couldn't get enough of the worlds I would enter when I read. And exploring, I remember we had kind of joining all the backyards in our neighborhood were these shrubs with little holes in them, and it was almost like a labyrinth. And my friends and I would go out. This is when it was safe to do so, and we would go out and just discover new worlds. And these were the things that made so much sense to me. And at the same time, how I was relating with other people. And, I had friends, everything was okay, but it just felt like I always wanted this deeper connection. And so as I grew up, these were these kind of two dual experiences of being absolutely in awe of the world, and at the same time, very confused about why you can't always have that feeling of awe in your day-to-day life. I did things like play dolls with my friends, and none of it ever really made sense to me. And so eventually, I noticed that my desire to deepen my experience of life grew stronger and stronger. I was kind of that friend who refused to make small talk, and everything had to dive deep into the meaning of life from the start. I noticed that I was being drawn as I started university and going on with school, um, really drawn to these deep philosophical topics. And so I started keeping a journal, I remember, called Time, and I would just be trying to understand what time was. And then I ended up doing my master's degree in cinema and kind of philosophy, and I was trying to understand color. Like, what is color? And you have such beautiful colors behind you in your background. And why were some painters painting the colors that they saw, but not the real colors? What is real? What is not? And I basically realized that to make a long story short, that there's only so far that philosophy can take us in understanding the world, and our minds can't really grasp things beyond a certain point. And that's why nothing quite felt real because we weren't, I was really, really in my logical mind, in my headspace. There was always this mystical side, and I didn't understand how they connected. And so I ended up after having some depression in my 20s around doing this master's thesis and realizing nobody understands color, and very short story. I remember reading, there wasn't a lot written on cinema and color at the time, so I was reading philosophy, art theory. I was reading all kinds of things. And Wolfgang von Goethe, like the German philosopher, I read that he was actually, when he died, he was found slumped over his desk, and they saw what he was working on, what he was writing, and it was about color and what a difficult problem was. Like, he was obviously a mystic. And I thought, who am I to be solving these problems? And and what am I going to do with my life after this? I can't just imagine myself working in this. Anyway, so I ended up, in my job, I was working in cinema, always really interested in storytelling, um, and I had always had no problem finding jobs, but they were never the idea. There was always, it felt like something more, very typical experience. So I was having these realizations that something had to change, but I wasn't quite ready to make the changes. And so the universe stepped in and helped me. And I ended up losing my job and having all of these relationship things fall apart all at once. And because I had already spent some time traveling abroad in Thailand, I realized I'm going to just go away on a kind of an open-ended trip, and I'm just going to go to Asia and try to see what's happening with my life. And I just knew I had no idea what I was going to do when I came back, but I also knew that everything was going to change somehow. And I was open to it. And that's the thing. We have to sometimes be really courageous in understanding that I have to be willing to lose everything to find something. So, so I went, and really interesting experience. I was in Indonesia for a little while, and I was in a bookshop, and I was exchanging books. You were able to give some back and take some, and I couldn't find anything I really wanted to read. And something made me look between like the bookshelf and the window, like the storefront window, just this narrow space, and a book had fallen there, and it was Sri Aurobindo and the mother's book called Our Many Selves. And it was, and I was immediately like, oh my gosh, this book was meant for me. And it's a very dense book. If you read it, it's a very difficult book to read, but I read it over 2 days. I didn't sleep, and I realized, oh my gosh, if we don't understand all the parts of us that make us ourselves, we can't understand the filter through which we experience the world. This was early on in my travels, so I ended up spending about 3 months. Every single day, I took an aspect of myself, something like an emotion, like the aspect of me that is scared or happy or curious or all of those things. And every day I would write one of those pieces as though they were a person inside of me. And so for 3 months, I wrote every single day, trying to understand myself. This was a very big shedding process, and it was just the beginning, but I really started to see which parts of myself were at war, which parts were complementing each other. And I started to just in that process be a little bit softer on myself. And it was kind of at the end of that 3 months that I was in this beautiful town in Thailand called Nong Khai, where my now spiritual teachers live. And I'd been using that place as a base, but my teachers were just not in my awareness. I was just doing my own thing. But after this long process, I I ended up back there and I met this beautiful human who said, "Why don't you try a Reiki session with this master teacher who's here?" And I was ready. And so I said, of course. And so I had my first Reiki session and I was absolutely amazed. You know, not only the sensations and the things I would feel just from the touch of the hand, which is, of course, not really just how, where I felt so comfortable and so protected and so much love. And then at one point, she, reached my heart space and I just panicked. I literally felt like I was going to like die or like fall, like I had to run away, but I didn't. And it was just such a profound experience that I just could not have anticipated. And I knew immediately that I was in the presence of a real master and that and that this was something I had to learn more about. And so that was a long and winding way to get there. But I started, this was about 15 years ago. And so I've been going back and forth, learning from my teacher, and so blessed to have become a master myself over these years. And then I also studied over the years craniosacral therapy from the biodynamic perspective. So really understanding how the energetics works with the body parts, and then the Akashic records. And what I came to realize is, of course, these are all different frequencies, they're all different modalities, but the way that I see it is it is all the frequency of love, and it is being channeled in different ways, and that will be, and some ways will resonate with others depending on where they are. One of the things that unites them all for me, in addition to it being all love expressing itself through us and in our shared space, is storytelling. So, and this explains why I was always so interested in reading and stories and cinema and the drama of life, because we all have a story. Like this is who we are. And so there is so much coming for us, which is all already here because there's no time, and there is so much behind us and in our ancestry, in our spiritual ancestry, and we could access everything by just starting with ourselves. And so when I do Reiki, I work silently. So I'll do a session and then I'll usually spend as much time afterwards, about an hour or so, talking to them, because the session in itself is so healing, but to be able to add that context and to share what I see or what comes in the session is so beautiful. And then when I do Akashic sessions, it's also being in this love frequency, and then it's again, it's uncovering the story of the soul and what wants to emerge. So that's how I came to this. And it really was when I started to step into being of service in this way that life started to feel real and not quite disconnected, or just going from being the observer to being immersed in this shared healing experience of humanity, if that makes sense.
Amazing. I have
Thank
so
you.
many questions for you.
Oh,
So, so when you mentioned that you first learned Reiki and then went on to do Akashic, and as you rightly said, that these are different modalities. Ultimately, everything is about energy work. Everything is energy, and that's all there is. So I would love to know how you use Reiki when you do the Akashic sessions. So is there any way that you use Reiki as well for when you call upon the records or when you're accessing the records? Because Akashic sessions can include channeling, reading, healing, and a lot goes in that. So I would love to know your perspective on how you integrate Reiki and Akashic.
yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, so I that's a beautiful question, and it's such a multidimensional question. In linear time, I started with Reiki, and so I became more practiced with that and developing the language, through which the energy wants to manifest, and how I can be of service. And so what I realized is that looking back, I've always been a little bit claircognizant. It's been these knowings. So for all of the times I had doubt and questions in the world, which my thinking mind always does, there was always a voice also giving me reassurances and knowing. And so I think that's how I went into my experience with Reiki. As much doubt as I've had with everything in life, I never had to question being on this path of Reiki. And it really is a path in addition to a modality, because we're working on ourselves and it's this self-mastery. And so I never had any doubt. I was being guided so beautifully, and I just felt guided. And so as I was continuing to work, I realized, oh, I see things. So I get visions, and it starts to play out like a movie. And probably this connects with my love of cinema and storytelling. And so what I realize now, looking back, in a sense, is that I was also in the Akashic field, and not consistently throughout my life, but every time. And I think there's a lot of perspectives on what the Akashic records are, because some say that they're stored here or there, or there's this finite thing. And when you are learning different modalities, I think it's really important to really focus exclusively on what the energies want to express from those modalities. So I'm in Reiki, I use the traditional Usui method. So tuning into Master Usui, and where was this impetus coming from? It was coming through him, of course. What are these energies? And developing this language around what are the energetic systems in the body, and what part of love wants to shine itself through. As I went on in years, I would notice different beings coming to work with me and through me. For me, it's especially Mother Mary and Kuan Yin at different times. Um, and so that language develops. And then working with the Akashic realm, at first, I was also going in, just working exclusively, not exclude, there's no such thing. It's all consciousness. What I came to realize the more I worked in the records, is that for me, I don't connect so deeply, even though I'm a reader, to this concept of the book of life or the library of the soul. Yes, that's beautiful, and every way in is a beautiful portal to the all. For me, I think because of my uh, mystic approach to life and looking at everything as being so interconnected, I really respond to the idea that the Akashic realm is an expanded aspect of our consciousness. So whether it's the consciousness of one soul, consciousness of any sentient being, a rock, a tree, a city, an animal, anything, it is all an expanded consciousness that is itself ever expanding, just like we're ever expanding. So when I think of a library, it feels a bit limited to me, because I go into a library and the books are written and they don't change. They change through our experience of them. So in that sense, yes, it's all ever changing and porous. But I really love understanding the records as this constant and dynamic aspect of unfolding experience, and love wanting to experience itself. So as our experience of life expands, so does the consciousness that we have access to. And we want to talk about multidimensionality. This is the beautiful forum for that. And we exist on all dimensions at once, but we don't necessarily have conscious access to them or an ability to access immediately. But as you work and as you practice, because we as humans, we're in this limited form and we have to practice expansion. As we expand, what the records can reveal to us will expand. Our dimensional aspects will expand. And so what I realized is that I've kind of always been bringing in that that beautiful Akashic wisdom and guidance, which is an aspect of us, but also the guide of us. It is the creator to our co-creatorship. I've been bringing that into my Reiki. I would say, you know, when I'm doing Reiki, my intention going in is for the healing and what wants to heal and what wants to arise. And the Akashic space, I think, informs the information that I'm getting through that would be in the highest good to share with the client. And then when I'm in an Akashic session, I am always invoking the ascended masters, the guides, the loved ones. And so the beings that I also work with in Reiki are there. And so this love energy is coming through. And for me, when I'm in the Akashic realm, it is all about the heart space and sharing from the heart space. And so it may not be that flavor in every Akashic reading you have. Some might be more cerebral, or it depends on, of course, the sacred connection with the client. But for me, it's what wants to come through that is going to connect us to our own hearts and to the shared heart. And so in a way they're connected, but I'm accessing in different ways. I'm kind of looking to the expanded consciousness when I'm in the Akashic realm. And when I'm giving Reiki, it's more like I am, and it's always allowing the guidance to come through. It's allowing the healing frequencies of love to come through. If that does that answer the question?
Oh, yes, pretty much. Thank you. Yeah, I completely agree with the interpretation of Akashic records. They're no way stagnant or static. They're pretty much dynamic because every moment they change. Whenever we have some experience, it gets recorded, and there's no such thing as time. So at the quantum level, everything is happening at the same time. So all timelines and all lifetimes are recorded, and they are recorded in multi-dimensional way. And like you said, that depending on your level of consciousness, you will access those records. And the higher you go, the more multi-dimensional aspects you can access. And like you beautifully said, that you can use that in your healing sessions. Probably you can get downloads where you can see if this pattern is from some different lifetime or something like that. So
Absolutely. Whether it's from, I very often see lifetimes come up. And this is actually something I've been thinking about a lot recently, or that's been coming up for me, that in speaking to how the records are dynamic and changing, a lot of, you know, a lot of souls come in, and you can immediately, when you tap into their records, you can see the multidimensional aspects, and whether they've had many more incarnations or existences on Earth or off planet or galactic. And sometimes there is kind of a flavor of newer to Earth and here to learn certain things and coming more galactic. And yet, in my experience, when I'm in the records, two things. One, I experience literally everybody as a multidimensional soul and as a light worker. And that sounds strange because, of course, there's a certain kind of person who's coming for an Akashic reading. So I'm not saying everybody on the planet, but we are all light and we are all from light. We are all made of light and we are all from source and made of source. And so we literally all are connected and of light. And in that sense, we're here to be of service. How that's going to look is going to be very different. And I realized, so even with the newer souls that are here, I'll notice, and how I'll see it is, instead of one lifetime coming through, I'll see a kind of a theme of lifetimes. And I realize it's like the records are providing this context. It's like the soul may not have, and this sounds really mind-bending, but the soul may not have actually, how we would see in linear time, had these number of lifetimes in this flavor, but that as the soul has incarnated now with their particular gifts, with the wounds that they're here to heal on behalf of themselves and the collective, that they are being almost given a series of lifetimes connected to their blood lineage, connected to their spiritual lineage, that will inform them of what wants to heal. So it's almost like we start with the self and with the body. And yes, like as the reader, you can go in and you can see, oh, there are some blockages at the level of the heart chakra or in the mental body, the emotional body. And as that becomes clear, those become portals to, and this is why, like, here's the greater context. And it's almost like in a movie when you're creating if you're making a movie, you're creating a character, and that character is going to be on screen going shopping, falling in love, doing whatever. But to create the character in a way that they're going to be real and relatable, you give them a story like, oh, their mother passed away when they were young, this, and that will never appear in the movie, but it creates for the character an ability to step into the fullness of the role. And we're all playing roles here in life as well. So it sounds strange, but I'll get all of these themes of lifetimes, which the guides will say, some of these lifetimes were lived, some of them are part of the collective archetypal experience. A typical one would be the witch being burnt at the stake. So did they actually get burnt at the stake, or are they so clearly tapped into that ancestral lineage? And so there is so much that can unfold about the story of the soul that is just, and none of it really matters. And that's another thing I find so important, that what matters is not that we had this life or that we were this person or that person. What matters is that we're here right now as we are, with the privilege of understanding more of what lives inside of us that doesn't need to live inside of us, so that we can clear our path. And as we clear our path by coming fully into who we are in the heart in an aligned way, that is what allows us to ascend and to expand. And so these are just helpful tools along the way, these aspects of our other selves. And I always like to tell my clients that, as interesting as it is to know more and more about who we are, the most important lifetime that we're living is the one we're currently conscious of. So are we living infinite parallel simultaneous lives? I believe we are, but the one that we are living right now is where our higher self, our soul, our grand consciousness wants us to focus for our evolution. And so to answer your question, it could be a past life that comes up on the table when I'm doing a Reiki session. It can be, I can see where chakras might, the energy centers might not be aligned. And whatever it is that comes up, I believe it's these downloads from the Akashic realm that are saying, yes, and this is something that is currently in the physical body, it's in the emotional body, this is what wants to be shared. And it's so important. There's so much healing that happens just from allowing yourself to be in a sacred space of healing and working with these frequencies of love. And on a physical level, having the nervous system calm down, because we're in a very safe place, and that allows all kinds of things. The body heals itself. No one is healing you. You're always healing yourself. But to have that added awareness, this isn't you, this is from an ancestor, or this is from an off-planet experience, it helps the client to say, oh, okay, I thought it wasn't me. And to have that affirmation, something that they already know inside, it becomes so much easier to let those obstacles go and to come into greater expansion.
So beautiful. I so resonate with you on so many levels.
Oh,
Because not many times that we actually have this awareness about the nuances of what are your own experiences versus what are archetypal experiences of the collective versus what are the lineage experiences. And it doesn't matter where the origin is from, because you're here to heal all of that. And to focus on this current lifetime in the here and now and heal all of that. It doesn't matter where you picked it up from and what narrative or story you're telling. And that I love the way you're saying your love for storytelling. And we all tell stories. Ultimately, our memory is actually the stories that we tell ourselves. And then the better the narrative is, the more expanded we can be. Because ultimately, we are all here to experience and evolve out of this. And we created all of this so that we
Yes.
expand our consciousness.
And that's it, right? So our souls created, depending on how much we want to look into how we're here, why we're here, this can go on. We can have the most interesting discussion, but our souls, based on the other experiences and based on all the other simultaneous lives we're having, but it's like for this life and in this incarnation, what can be learned? And it's not, yes, Earth is a school. We're here to learn through challenges, absolutely, and that's why it's hard and it feels so dense.
Yeah.
But ultimately, more than lessons, and I wrote a book that I was going to talk about too, which and so I talk so much. You're so much more than you think you are. I talk so much in the book about the lessons we're here and how to have a happier attitude towards these lessons because we chose them for the soul's growth. More and more, I'm really gravitating to the word of experiences, and so source, could have just stayed source and could have just stayed in this kind of this beautiful, blissful no thing. And then for whatever reason, and I believe somehow that love precedes and creates this concept even of source, and then even the idea of source wanting to experience itself. But something happened, and in the name of expansion, there was this momentum or activation of source saying, I want to experience myself. That is the way of expansion. And so if we can agree on any truth and where science meets spirituality meets quantum physics, it is this law of expansion. And yes, we expand and contract, and this is how we grow, but the contraction is always leading to a greater expansion, right? So we can think of evolution, let's say, as a spiral. So it looks like we're coming back to the same thing, expansion, contraction, but it's always going up. So it's always from another perspective. And so when Source decided to split off into all of these fractals of existence and all of these souls and all of these expansions, the only reason that kind of makes sense for that, it's not to be good or bad, because those things don't exist. These are binary constructs in our minds. It just wants to have experiences. It wants to understand itself through the various experiences of being separate from itself. We can only come to our true essence, this universality within ourselves, by understanding ourselves as separate from ourselves. And so if we can imagine it like a movie or like a story where Source says, oh, I want to have all these characters and I want to experience life through all of these different characters, and then each soul is in charge of a series of these experiences, in the name of Source, to which we are connected, of course, it's all one. And so we end up, as this on a soul level, choosing these incarnations that will be perfectly suited to what wants to be experienced. And how do we experience? Through lessons and then through growth. And then it's this, and if I can take a little brief detour, I love this idea of this contraction and expansion. When I was learning biodynamic craniosacral therapy, you learn all about the womb and how the body develops in the womb, because this is where the journey starts. This is where the soul comes in, and this is where the traumas start, and where we kind of start to experience ourselves as a spark of light within the context of a constraining body. And so as the womb develops, and of course, this as a mother, but the womb, the heart is the first thing to physically develop within the body. And then in the womb, the head is literally bent down, touching the heart, right? So the head and the heart are in connection. And this is so beautiful. And this is the spark of the human experience. And then the body, the baby goes out and then comes back in. And then eventually we're here and the head's here and the heart's here. And this is the longest distance in the world until we learn how to bridge them. And so as we go through the journey of our life, we come here. Some come in and remember their other lives immediately. And of course, there's beautiful souls who come in for that reason. But most of us come and we forget. And then we have no idea why we're here. And that's kind of the point, because we're here to learn things. But we're not coming in at ground zero. You know, we're always coming in based on where the impetus of our soul left off in the last incarnation. So there will always be something new. And then we'll always be learning about ourselves so much as we get older, you know, as we come to this spiritual path. I don't think there are certain souls, I think, who come in and they constantly feel this, like I did to an extent, this longing for connection, meaningful connection between people, which I realized ultimately was a search for God and for divinity, and this desire to merge. And then we 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 don't find it. Something feels uneasy. Maybe life throws us a really big curveball. Maybe someone passes away who's really close to us. You know, maybe we lose our jobs, or the whole world seems to fall apart to some extent. And you're kind of brought to your knees, and you're suddenly in this moment of everything I thought I had built to create this life and this safety, and everything I thought life was about is gone, but I'm still here. And that's the key. And it just makes me cry when I think about it. You know, whatever comes to kind of break us, we realize I'm still here. How, why am I still here when everything that made sense doesn't? That can become the spark of a really deep awakening. And I think, knowing your story to some degree, that this would make a lot of sense for you. And so from there, I really I like to call it everyday evolution. And I'm so committed to helping people who are, you know, just beginning to want to be on a spiritual path, even though we're all spirit. And so everyday evolution, you know, we don't have to go to a mountaintop or meditate in a cave for 20 years or do all these extreme things, although we might be really tempted to, and maybe that's the path for some people. But it's really about starting, like you said, exactly where we are today, and trying to understand ourselves as this beautiful story, this beautiful mystery. And what do I have inside of me already, in my body, and through my body's experiences, my memories? Each memory is a portal to another dimension. You know, every time two people talk and connect, we've created a new reality, another dimension. So we're already engaging with our multidimensional selves by just being curious about what it is that is more revealing about our essence than the job we have, or all of the things that make our typical sense of self-identity. Like, how can we learn, you know, new things about our identity?
Yeah, so true. Actually, we base our identity on the stories that we kind of tell ourselves, and the narratives that we create. And as far as I'm concerned, I've had multiple awakenings in my life. I lost my mother also very early, when I was 11 years old. And that is why, like, I always had this feeling, like you said, that I don't fit in here. And now I have soul remembrance of being a multidimensional soul, projecting my consciousness across the multiverse, including the other star systems. So, but the radical awakening was after my son crossed over, and he's here, and he helps me. So he guides me. And that's where I had this soul remembrance. But in spite of going through the dark night of the soul, it depends on how deep and radical your awakening is. Till that time, and I, as I said, like I have had multiple awakenings, but I didn't have this kind of soul remembrance then, which I have now. Because there is veil, there is amnesia, and this planet is so dense right now. And we are ascending, but still, we are still not in the 5D completely, and the density is a lot. And when we tell these stories, and not just to ourselves, but even as a collective, what happens is the belief systems develop that, okay, you have this karma which you have to redeem, and because somebody did this to you in this lifetime, some eons ago, whatever, you have to kind of and then because of that you get stuck, and then the consciousness gets recycled again and again, again and again. And this cycle of birth and death, we get kind of stuck in this matrix, false matrix. So what is your experience when you work with your clients? How do you kind of get guidance from the Akashic or Reiki to help people come out of this kind of narratives where they have these belief systems where they're stuck because of certain patterns? And actually, when we go up uh, in the higher realms, we realize that there is no such thing as karma. There is only experience. but we
Very much
do,
part of the third density
yeah.
reality.
And then we have these linear lifetimes even as a part of third density. So can you just throw some light on this?
Yes, what a beautiful question. And there's so many layers to it because like you said, and maybe we can talk about that a little later, but we're in a very dense place in humanity now, and we are in the middle of this shift, and it's all I love how you phrased the question, because going from this macro situation of this very scary and very fascinating shift that we're in to an individual client and their belief systems and how to come out of that. It's exactly the as above, so below. It's not one or the other. We can't just focus on, I'm working on ascension and I'm working to raise the consciousness of the collective without clearing, it is the clearing of this inside of each of ourselves that creates the expansion. And it's been coming to me lately somehow there that, and again, we're not talking about this right now, but that the 5D is not like a vacation destination. We don't kind of say, I'm going to go there and go there. It's not an external thing to us. All of the dimensions exist as potentialities and realities for many right now. And it's through the removal of our blockages and the self-awareness and the self-understanding that we can expand and have this access to the dimensions, and it anchors that dimensional reality into our lives right now. It's a process. It's not a destination. It's already here, and it's like, how can we see it? So really beautiful question. And I wasn't even thinking about 3D, 5D when I started giving Reiki, but this is what's happening. This is what healing is, coming into our sense of radical wholeness, which is recognizing we're already perfect. So like you said, it's realizing that beyond the karma, the emotional blockages, the mental, the belief systems, we are connected to what is utterly perfect and whole, and desiring for us to go through this birthing and rebirthing process. And so yeah, okay. So I would say that when I tune in, whether it's Reiki or Akashic Records, what will come to the forefront pretty immediately, and for me, I'll experience it as a feeling in my body, like, oh, it's the solar plexus, or it's the heart, it's fear, it's whatever it is, there will be almost that theme, like this is the biggest thing that is ready, that the soul, because again, a healer is not doing healing. They are creating a space for the soul on the table, to emerge with, this is what I am ready to release now. And we as the practitioners and the readers get the privilege of holding space for it and for getting this kind of stream of love and this guidance and information about how can we help with that process. And so in a Reiki session, for example, let's say it's about an hour. So by the time an hour has passed, it feels like lifetimes. And it feels like we've gone from that initial feeling of hardness or blockage or anxiety to states of relaxation where further things come up, to release. And it's a whole journey. So without fail, the client will get up after the session and at the very least will say, oh, I feel so relaxed. I feel so different. And, without necessarily being able to put a name to it or to say, oh, it's 3 lifetimes ago and without going into details, they feel lighter and clearer. And then we talk and all these things come through. And then I always tell them, this sense of expansion is going to grow within you as you continue to expand. More of that, what wants to be released, will come up. So you may have these extra heightened emotions or feel like you might have a headache or feel exhausted. These are all natural processes of release. And so the first step is recognizing that it's a process. There are cases where there are instantaneous healings, but for the most part, we're dealing with a process of the body releasing, in this lifetime, years and years of accumulated stuff from toxic belief patterns, from our conditioning, from all of it. And then yes, we'll talk about what to do going forward, and the way I see it is and I talk about this in my book as well, like healing, you can kind of have 2 approaches to healing. And I think that they work in tandem, and sometimes you need one, sometimes the other. And one way is to deal with the shadow side of ourselves, which we all have, kind of head on. And so it's kind of being ready to face what wants to come up. And we don't have to go looking for it. It's right there. It's there every time we react in anger or feel worry or we can't get out of a thought pattern. These are the shadows. And I like to refer sometimes to this Tibetan practice. It's called something like meeting your demons for tea or inviting in your demons for tea, where when you start to feel something. So I'll give them these practices to do. So you feel anxiety or you may not even know what you're feeling, but you know where you're feeling it. Maybe it's in your chest or your throat feels tight. Just lean into it and imagine it like something that is unfolding before you, and it's scary and it's dark. And as you sit with it, it might take certain shapes. Some memories might come up. It might be connected to something you can explore, but you are very willfully not you're saying, I want to see you. And I know that through the seeing of you, I am lessening my fear of you. And that gives both of us permission to be free from each other. These energies don't want to be with you. They want to be free just like we want to be free. So, but we need to separate from it. So it's kind of this invitation, but for a while, and you sit with it and it changes. So I just feel like it's so important, to remind people how the awareness of something changes it. This is a scientific principle, the Heisenberg principle. What you become aware of changes. So it's 2 things. It's intention and awareness. So our intentions are basically our thought forms. And as we think, we create a reality around that. So if we go in with an intention to be scared of something, we're going to stay scared of something. If we go in and we want to heal, we want to release, and we ask for guidance and support and be aware that we're protected, and then we say, okay, I can now sit with the shadows. And you can sit, you can meditate, see what arises that's uncomfortable, and allow that intention with the awareness of what it is to change it and allow it to change. We are so attached to our negative belief patterns. They keep us safe. That's our ego. They keep us where we are. But we have to have that intention to see what's on the other side of these constructs. So that's one approach, to deal with the shadows directly. And the other approach is to do practices that keep us in the light. And this isn't about false positivity or spiritual bypassing, but there's nothing bypassing about connecting to the light, right? And so I think everyone in their lives, and I call people's attention to it, is when did you feel really, really happy in your life? Or when did you feel awe? Like that sense of awe to me is the greatest portal to healing and to our universal multidimensional self. So maybe you're looking at a sunrise, maybe you're whatever it is, you're in love with someone and you meet their gaze and time stops and you're in another reality. So everyone has one memory of something like that. And so even if they don't, I encourage them, wake up in the morning and see if there's something that is, look for something different. Look out the window and see if the light is coming in a certain way or whatever it is. And then take a moment and notice it. And what does it feel like? And where does it hit you in your body? Where do I feel lighter as a result of this? And you tune into it. And whatever you bring your attention to expands and amplifies. And so you start to notice over time that your sense of excitement, curiosity, ease, they grow. And as those grow, we end up with the capacity to look at the negative emotions, so-called, these great teachers that we have, with more capacity, because we're feeling more grounded in ourselves, more centered and more connected to the light. So it's kind of staying light focused and waiting for the shadows to arise, or going in and looking at the shadows, allowing them to change. And it's an ongoing process between the two. The most important thing I tell my clients is this is a process. So just being here and wanting change is already half the battle. It's the biggest portal that we have to allow for the mysteries of life to unfold and to start to understand why have I always reacted defensively to certain situations, or why, like for me personally, from a young age, I was always so triggered by what I perceive to be inauthenticity. Like if someone is not being honest, like why is everyone wearing a mask and no one is showing their true selves? And I started to, and that became certain things. And it's like, why do people always need, whatever patterns that we have become portals of, oh, that's interesting. Where does that come from? And if I can share one little story, I remember really wondering why I had this feeling in my life in terms of relating to other people. And I realized for me, relating to other people has been a source of great joy and great challenge. And this is how I grow. And I was like, where did I get this feeling of people want something from me and I don't know how, and it's not reciprocal and something. And I realized this is me, like this, I'm attracting this kind of feeling in this situation. Where does it come from? And one day, this is after I started my Reiki practice, I went into a deep meditation and with the intention to understand where does this feeling come from, that I'm not in these reciprocal relationships. And I just went into this deep meditation and I instantly had this kind of flashback to my youth. And I know that when I was a baby, I was told I never crawled on my hands and knees. Like I went straight from kind of being on my belly to walking. You did the same. I love that.
I
So
did the
maybe
same, and even Arnav did the same.
really, I can feel him so strongly here when you mentioned him before. So much is coming through. And anyways, so I remembered that in my meditation, that I was on my belly, and I brought myself into that experience of being in my belly and what was happening there. And then I instantly had this this vision of all of these hands like reaching up from underneath, like reaching up for me, like help me, help me, help me. So needing me in some way, right? And I connected that instantly to ancestral trauma, right? And I had this instant awareness of, oh my gosh, my ancestry is calling to me, and it's through this lifelong, like decades long misalignment with how I'm interacting with people and feeling needed to, oh, they have given me this awareness and the tools, the love, I with ants, that's a whole other conversation, but we get so much love from our ancestry, all of their gifts, the resilience, the resourcefulness to be the breaker of the chain. And I recognized instantly that one of my purposes here is to break that ancestral chain. And that is for myself, but it's for the collective. And so that's just one example. And it's not like my relationships all healed overnight, but that awareness, it just brought so many layers and dimensions to this fixed habit pattern, right? So yeah, so these are some of the tools I like to share with my clients.
Thank you. Yeah, I can so resonate because I have also been doing a lot of ancestral healing and breaking the lineage patterns. And yeah, so I will share more about that later. What I wanted to ask you is, can you share some of your client stories where you actually kind of realize that there have been some dynamics from either other dimensions, the star systems, or other lifetimes, and then you kind of brought this to awareness and that brought the healing? Can you share some client stories?
Yeah, that's such a great question. There's so many. There's one that I shared. I'll go off planet soon, but I mean, it's so I'll just a very typical example. And I already mentioned it, like the witch burnt at the stake, but it's such a common archetype, so it's easy. But it's not one we should minimize. We're in an age of the rising of the divine feminine, and it's very purposeful that this is coming up. But, clients will come in and I'll immediately sense, and sometimes my voice will even catch, because I'm picking up on what's happening, and there will be these issues with expression. And how I'll kind of see it, it usually works its way backwards. So I'll pick up on some things from childhood, because let's say we were punished or persecuted for speaking our truths in a past life. We're not just going to come into this life and everything's fine and suddenly, we choose circumstances that will allow us to bring up exactly what wants to heal. So we'll often have been raised in childhoods where our truths were not welcomed, or where we weren't safe to express, or we had teachers, maybe it wasn't in the home, but it was with teachers. So I'll often get a sense of a childhood situation, and I will talk to the client about that, and they will validate that this has been their experience, and we can connect that to their ability to express. And that is already so healing. And then as the story unfolds, and as we're talking and going through these processes, more and more will reveal itself. So then we'll get to, and sometimes they're very, particular lives. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I can think of a lifetime that came up for a client related to that, where they were a really gifted musician. And in this case, I believe it was the flute. And their music created such harmonious vibrations around, and they felt just totally connected to themselves and their divine essence and their purpose when they were playing music. And then because of their gift, they were kind of, within a larger context of a society, they were kind of asked, but not really asked, but told to become the official musician for, let's say, a court, or this would be a long, long time ago. So in a land with some kind of small kingdom, and they would become, and sometimes, yeah, sometimes it's a scribe or sometimes it's a musician, and where they were being employed to do this or to join a theater troupe to play their music. And then while they were in those occupations, which they didn't really want, but of course their soul chose it for them, same soul, a war would break out, or the royalty or the kingdom or whatever started to become very corrupt, and they would ask the musician, yes, the musician would be aware of all of these things going on, and they're being asked to play music to kind of make people feel better while all of these terrible things are happening. And so they start to connect their creatorship, their divine gift, with horrors and tragedies, and so they come into this life with an imprint of either it's unsafe for me to express my truth, and that's the witch burnt at the stake, or I feel really horrible inside when, if I use my creativity, I'm running away from a truth where I didn't stand up for something, where for some people it's shame that I didn't stand up or walk away. I took part, I was complicit somehow in something horrible happening, and so they come in with this creative blockage or this inability to express themselves. And as soon as they hear these kinds of stories, and these aren't they're stories, but it's the reality of their soul's experience, the truth of it, they instantly realize it. And it can be really, it's interesting because it's all that it's all that person. It can be so hard to have self-love and self-compassion, but when we see it on an other, even if it's you, another life, where this poor person, of course they didn't walk away from this situation, it would have been way too hard, and it's so understandable. Then it goes a long way towards healing that wound, because that lifetime it's somewhere in the ether, it's an imprint, but it doesn't long to have an expression now, it longs to be released. And so suddenly you start to feel more safe, and this awareness of that divine gift has always been in you. And now in this lifetime, you chose circumstances where you're not going to be killed for having this view, or you're not going to be hired by a court to do something. You're in a situation where your limitations are perceived because of these wounds. But actually, if you can find that courage to step out of, and it's not like this person has to quit their job. And so many people think, oh, I have to change my job to be in my purpose, or I have to do this. From exactly where you are, in whatever circumstances you need to be in to make a living, to do whatever, pick up a musical instrument. And very often the person will say, I've always wanted to play a musical instrument, or I've always felt musical, but not knowing what to do. Join a choir, pick up an instrument. You don't have to be famous, but it's that expression of yourself that is fulfilling the longing of the soul to have that experience. Does that answer the question?
Oh, yes.
There's so many stories you can share about. And if I can share one more, and I wrote about this in my book, sometimes it's not a healing of a past life or something so much as some kind of remembrance. And so I remember having a client, I don't remember all the details, but they felt really, disconnected from their heart space, and also very unsure what path is right. There is no right path, because the path is always finding us. It doesn't exist until we co-create it with our heart's alignment. And I just saw this beautiful image that I shared in my book where and this is directly from the client and from her records, where it was kind of like, if you can imagine the heart shape, and so you're at the top point, and there's kind of these two diverging paths, right? Because the heart is going in two directions, and this heart is, once you decide to go left or to go right, you feel like you've completely you're eliminating other choices, and you're focusing on a path, and you may be full of doubt on it. It might rain, it might shine, it's thunder, lightning, all of the journey of the life, and eventually you get to the bottom. And then you realize that the other path connects to the same place. And it's not about going backwards, of course, it's about going from your heart's longing to grow. And in whatever path you choose, you're back at you end up back at source. You end up at a higher perspective. And we took the choice we made so seriously, and we should make all of our choices seriously and consciously and with alignment, while also knowing that there are infinite other choices and paths we can take to get to the same exact point. So that also really helped that client get to this point of, oh, I don't have to choose just one thing. It can be anything, so that's another example.
Yeah, and there's a huge amount of discussion on this.
Thank you for tuning in from wherever you are in the world. As Ramdas says, that we are just walking each other home. So thank you for co-creating the new earth along with me and my guests. If you resonate with me, subscribe to my channel, like, comment, and share. Let's keep this beautiful energy in flow, in motion. Namaste. Lots of love.